emanated from, started actually in 2006, when I was NAACP president. I received several complaints. People would come into the NAACP meetings and, they would voice their displeasure with whatever experience they had had with the police. And for a long time, I would just listen patiently and try the best that I could. People would constantly call the NAACP messages they needed help. So I started to have meetings such as this, and we haven't had one in years, so I thank Sean for facilitating this meeting. So I would have community meetings to hear from the community directly what was going on in Yonkers regarding police misconduct or allegations of police misconduct. So after a second meeting, I received a call from the Department of Justice asking me if I needed help, and simultaneously at the same time the NAACP was asking me to have a big press conference demanding, an investigation into the Yonkers police. However, I kind of backed off and didn't call for an investigation. I decided, along with the folks at the Justice Department, I asked, how can I do this? And I started to collect complaints directly, forwarding them to the Internal Affairs Department of the Yonkers Police Department and to the Department of Justice at the time. So the key was really documenting these complaints. And for those in other communities who constantly asked, how do you go about doing this? The key thing is documenting incidents or allegations. Now, in late 2007, 2008, the Department of Justice did start their investigation into Yonkers regarding allegations of police brutality. And they're still here. It's an ongoing investigation. I think around 2009, my date might be wrong, they issued a technical assistance letter regarding Yonkers, the best practices at the time. And on a positive note, shortly thereafter, because most people don't know, at the time, police officers in Yonkers did not wear name badges. It's probably one of 2 police departments in the entire country that did not wear name badges. So as a result of the technical assistance letter, there were recommendations that the Department of Justice made to the Yonkers Police Department. And one of them was police officers should wear name badges, because I would receive many complaints from people who had experienced police brutality, and they would say, like, Beavis and Butthead in the 3rd precinct. And I'd be like, who's Beavis and Butthead? And I was like, can you tell me the officer's name? And so there was no way to identify an officer. So that's a good thing that came out, one of the good things that came out of that initial part of the investigation. By no means is the investigation over, and so this community meeting, like the other community meeting that's going to happen on Saturday, is to kind of find out, are things better since 2007, 2008, since the DOJ came into the community? Are things kind of okay, or is it that complaints have decreased significantly? So, and the only way to find that out is to go to the community and have the community come and speak directly to us. This panel of experts, they're here today, and it's good to have the police and lawyers and other police commissioners, attorneys and other stakeholders, and I'm happy to say an elected official, because it's been very difficult since 2006 to get an elected official to step forward and address this, not a public hearing, nothing. So I'm very happy that Shelley Mayer is here, and a clergy member, which is also very important because they actually have a vast amount of population coming in and are comfortable to speak to the clergy. So this is a very good panel, and unprecedented, I might add. So I just want to start by asking each of the panelists a question and asking them to answer as best, as they can, starting with Commissioner Gardner, and then down the line. What do you think should be done to improve police and community relations?
Let me begin by saying that I just want to talk a little bit about the Department of Justice investigation that you mentioned. The investigation began in 2007. The Department of Justice initiated an investigation of the allegations of police misconduct, including excessive force and discriminatory policing. Since the inception of the investigation, the Yonkers Police Department has worked cooperated 100% with the Department of Justice. In 2009, they issued a technical advisory memo, which basically gave over 200 recommendations to the department that they suggested we implement. I'm happy to report that as of today, we've implemented over 90% of those recommendations, and we continue to cooperate with the Department of Justice until this very day. But just to backtrack, let me begin by thanking you for inviting me here and providing me the opportunity to participate in this forum. I think this is very constructive for us in the community. I understand that the effectiveness of any police organization is largely dependent upon its ability to work together with the public that we serve. So accordingly, the Yonkers Police Department places a high value on our relationship with the community, and we work hard. We have a number of initiatives and programs that we deploy in an effort to build upon that relationship and improve. I'm not naive. I do understand that police officers are human beings and we make mistakes, and we address them as best we can. And I also understand that there is a level of mistrust in the community here in Yonkers, with some people in the community regarding law enforcement, and in particular with teenagers and youth in the community here in Yonkers. And just to give you a little background, in 2009, since 2009, we've been working together with the District Attorney's Office and our federal partners to address gang-related violence here in Yonkers. And since that time, we've removed over 120 violent gang members from our streets. And what we're seeing is young kids, 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids, filling the void in these gangs and engaging in violent crime, including shootings. And this mistrust manifests itself in different ways. And what we're seeing is that these kids are not cooperating with the police. And many of these victims know the identity of the shooters, the suspects, and other people in the community know what happened, but they are not cooperating with us. So it hinders our ability to engage in activities that suppress youth-related violence. So we need help from the community, from parents, and we want to work together to make this better. We have made progress here in Yonkers. This past year, 2014, we've seen a 13% decrease in major crime here, a reduction in every category of crime in every precinct. Complaints are down here in Yonkers, and we continue to improve operations. And this police department is not the same police department that it was 10 years ago. And we continually work to improve our relationship with the community and forums like this that we look forward to having, and I'm very happy to open dialogue with everyone here.
Mayor Martin, please. What do you think should be done to improve police and community relations?
I think that in order to improve police and community relations, you have to have an open, honest conversation. And we generally don't do that very well. We tend to basically circle the wagons and say how great we are. So what you see from a lot of police departments, a lot of municipalities, is that they will tout their successes and ignore the failures. And we ignore simple truths, actually. When you see people who are arrested for a simple possession of marijuana and their jaws wired shut as a result of their encounter with law enforcement, and they're not charged with resisting arrest or any kind of struggle, it makes you wonder how a person gets their jaw broken for something that's not even a crime. There is no assault on law enforcement. So in order to really mend the fences, you have to have accountability. You have to have an independent investigative body for police misconduct. And in my mind, that would be whether that police misconduct is theft or stealing overtime, all the way up to homicide. And sometimes you'll find it's not misconduct, but you need an independent body to get there. You can't trust the police department to police itself any more than you can with the #1 story in the United States these days, whether the footballs are underinflated. So we put more pressure on the NFL than we do our law enforcement officers. So Adrian Peterson can't play football because of the manner in which he disciplined his son. You look at Mr. Rice, he can't play football because he had an altercation with his wife. Now, I'm not concerned that Ray Rice is going to come into my home and bother me. I'm not concerned Adrian Peterson's going to come into my house or discipline my children. However, if a police officer is quite often disciplined, or should be disciplined for misconduct, you have some officers who have multiple federal civil rights lawsuits under their belt where they've cost a particular city more than $1 million, yet they're still working and they still carry a gun and have a badge. So as long as that happens, it's going to be very difficult for us to suggest to young people that they should trust the police. And when you have older people in their homes who have their door broken down and they're shot and killed on medical calls, it's difficult to suggest that they should trust the police, especially when sometimes these incidents are accompanied by racial slurs. And you can see that with the chief of police from Pelham Manor right now. So here's a man who is from the top, using racial slurs and thinking that racial stereotypes is appropriate. And he can do what he wants on his own time, but he's an employee of the people, and he's sworn, taken an oath to serve and protect the people. And being a police officer by no means is an easy job. It takes a very unique and special individual to do that, and when he or she takes that job, we should support them 100%, but they should remember that they are there and they've taken that oath to serve and to protect, not to command a higher level of respect from everyone else that's in the community. In fact, they're the ones who should have the thicker skin. And you'll find that when law enforcement officials work with the community, when they get to know the members of the community, things work beautifully. Then they can go and they can talk to somebody and they will get information that no actual investigation will unearth by itself. And I can tell you, as a former prosecutor in the DA's office in Westchester, I started with Carl Gary in 1992 and stayed there for 11 years, that I have a lot of police officers who I'm very good friends with. Sitting next to one of them right here, okay? And I can tell you right now, if Detective Mitchell was working a homicide case, there's not one place in Mount Vernon he couldn't go without needing backup, without worrying about getting hurt. And that's not to be naive and say you couldn't get hurt, but his relationship was one of honesty and openness, and he didn't ask people to do something he wasn't willing to do himself. So they were willing to help and give him information. That's how you build it. And you build it by employing more people from the community, so that you're policed by people who live in the community. Because no matter what we may think, it's a lot more difficult for me to bother the commissioner's son when the commissioner and I went to school together. I'm going to have to look him in his eye and explain what I did, why his son's jaws wired shut, and it's just marijuana. I think that body cameras are essential. I think that it's essential that you have dash cams on automobiles used by the police. And lots of people express frustration. They say that, well, it didn't lead to a conviction in Mr. Garner's case, didn't lead to charges. No, it didn't. However, without that video footage, we wouldn't even be talking about Mr. Garner. You wouldn't know it happened. And so what we do see right now, cases that are visible largely because we have video footage and audio footage. That's why you even know that these cases existed. And there are countless other cases that exist that we never will learn about. So I think that this is a great first step. Okay, I think that we have to come together more often. We have to have this kind of dialogue. We've got to be honest with ourselves. And I think we can take a page from South Africa when we look at the Truth and Reconciliation that went on there following apartheid. And if we're willing to really have open and honest dialogue, willing to accept blame where it may lay, even if it's not easy to say, yes, maybe I play a role, but not to always divert it to someone else, then we can start to take the steps there, realizing it's going to be a very long process, and that, as we were speaking earlier, we're finding out that what we thought was just a bump maybe is cancer. So you can't cover it up with a Band-Aid. It's going to take real hard work. It's going to take a change in policy. Again, independent investigation, independent prosecution. We need, in my estimation, a change in the grand jury process. It should not come out of the district attorney's office. And in fairness to the police department, sometimes they bear the brunt of criticism that should be aimed at the district attorney's office because they're not putting the case in the grand jury. The grand jury is actually housed in the Westchester County District Attorney's office. It should be housed independently in a separate building, and the defense should have a right to put on a case, not simply to present witnesses for the district attorney to cross-examine. I take it that my time is up at this point.
Thank you. Detective Mitchell.
I'm a retired detective. Just to give you a little history, I worked with youth as a school resource officer. I worked with gangs. I was a homicide detective, supervisor in narcotics, vice president of National Black Police Association, eventually president, member of the Black Law Enforcement of America, member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity, member of the Masons in White Plains. So, you know, I'm kind of bad. I have family pretty much all over the county. During my time as a law enforcement officer and working cases that I have not to my knowledge or my department's knowledge, have one civilian complaint, and I've made hundreds of arrests. That has to do with the way that you approach the situation as the borough of Judo. When you ask the question of how do we deal with the situations that are at hand now in society, the first is being honest, transparency. One of the most disappointing things I found here in Westchester County, and I expected to hear something from the county exec or a leading police department, we will not tolerate police brutality. Nobody has said that. And that is very disappointing in my eyes as a law enforcement officer that put my life on the line just like other officers did for doing it the right way. It's important for you say you want dialogue, so it's important to first say that and then act upon that. We need to say we're not going to tolerate police brutality. That needs to be made out loud. That needs to be made clear. You say it and then you act on it. And just like Mayo said earlier, even if it's something as far as stealing, there has to be a penalty. As long as we don't address these matters, people will continuously do this. Back in 2008, I remember Gail was with us, Damien. We went up to the district attorney's office, something as clear as putting together a brochure. Just like you have elder abuse and child abuse, there's brochures out there for that. We do not have a brochure or a clear path how to address police brutality. It changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And that's unfortunate. It needs to be universal in this county. You need to either be able to go to Westchester County Police Department and file a report if you're found against an officer in Yonkers or Mount Vernon or White Plains. Because you're not going to feel comfortable going into the Yonkers, and I understand it. I've spoken to many of people. I was investigating a homicide in Mount Vernon. When a gentleman came in, I had to interview him because he knew one of the guys we were looking at. And his head looked like a pumpkin. And I tried to interview him, and all he kept talking about was how what happened. I said, look, you have the right, just like anybody else. You need to contact your attorney. I'm not in here for that. And then I let my supervisor know. Okay. He went about it. He eventually did. He lost the case. But the fact of the matter is that this is the right thing to do. You don't brush it underneath the rug because it comes back to bite the department later. If you're really working for the city of which you work, then you need to, when people want to report something, you give them the right information. Too many times I've heard people say, well, that's not what he told me. That's not what the officer at the desk told me. Or they gave me the wrong form. So it's not comfortable to go into a police department to make a report. And I understand it. And that's what we have to deal with, the reality of it. Some people's reality, and I'm going to say African Americans or minorities, reality is different from white people's reality. And that's a simple plain fact. But the thing is we refuse to sit down and talk about that reality. We refuse to sit down and say, well, why do you feel this way? And if it's not happening to you, why is it happening to me? Nobody wants to have that discussion. And the only way that we're going to get to the end to the problems of these things is if we sit down and have these discussions. Look, I'm proud of my culture. But believe me, you can look at me and say, I got a couple of cultures in me. And I'm proud of every last one of them. There's no shame in my game here. But that's the reality of it. And, the thing is I sit down, I don't judge people based on the color of their skin. I don't even judge them on their religion. I judge them on how they treat me. And, we got to get out of this. You're looking at somebody, you look at the skin, or you're looking at the uniform. I remember one of the hardest things for a black officer is to work in a black community because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And it happens because you're treated one way in the department and you're treated one way in the community. And the department doesn't acknowledge it and the community doesn't acknowledge it. They don't know what you go through in the department and the department doesn't know what you go through in the street. And all of these different issues that have come about, Eric Gardner, Mike Brown, all of these, DJ Henry, Kenneth Chamberlain, one of the most amazing things to me is why these departments, the district attorney's office, haven't sat down with a black law enforcement agent or organization and discussed it, because they have a unique perspective. They're black and they're in law enforcement. Why wouldn't you sit down with them to ask, what do you think we could do to make things better? And it just amazes me. So, what you really, if we're going to really deal and have this conversation, we need to sit down and have the conversation. We're not going to say everything you like, and that goes on both sides. There's some things we need to address, and there's some things that you need to address. But that's the reality. That's life. That's what we strive for, to get better. And the failure of leadership, to me, it's leadership. Because as an officer, I did what my boss told me to do. The leadership has to step up to the plate and make these decisions and stand on their ground and say, we're going to do this. We're not tolerating police brutality. We're not tolerating crime. And it's as simple as that. And this is how we're going to address it. But all of this, there's so little transparency, and it's scary. I have children that range from the age of 10 to 32. My oldest son is a fireman. My other son went to college he wanted to become an officer. He's so frustrated by what's transpired with Michael Brown and DJ Henry and Eric Gardner, he wants to go back to school and become an educator. He said, Dad, I want to teach the kids. I don't want to do law enforcement. He said, because I don't know how I act if somebody steps on me, because I haven't had to deal with what you had to deal with. And I'm disappointed. He has a degree. I said, the boy to school with a degree. I paid for that. And he wants to change now and get a master in education. I'm not mad, but again, we need to have this more often. We need to be clear. We need to be transparent about the issues that we're really facing.
Thank you.
We address the issue of oversight and accountability of our law enforcement professionals, because that's what they are. They're professionals. We talk about oversight in our banking system. We talk about oversight in the motor company, automobile companies. We talk about oversight on Wall Street. But we never want to talk about oversight in law enforcement. The police officer, out of all the other departments, is the first contact young black men of color, have with the justice system. They are the entry door to the justice system. And if we have biases, and we have officers that violate policies and procedures and training, it's not a surprise when you look at the numbers and the statistics why there's so many arrests of young black men. Not just that they're committing crimes. You know, we like to say, not everybody, everybody in jail has an excuse. But we know by watching the news and watching the reports that there are innocent people that are coming out of jail. And we see young men being arrested for frivolous arrest when in Scarsdale or Hartsdale, in communities, they're not doing the same arrest. We know this. We know this. There are studies that show it. So how do we address it? How do we address it as a community? How do we address it as law enforcement? And like everybody that's here said, the first thing is honest dialogue. We was at a forum with the NAACP in White Plains, and we asked the mayor and the police commissioner, does racism exist in the police department? And they honestly sat there and said no. They, oh, okay. The commissioner, but it shows. After the shooting of Detective Ridley, Governor Patterson did the police on police shooting task force because they wanted to look at why black cops off duty on plain clothes were being shot at or killed by their white counterparts when they were trying to make an arrest. And in New York, there's been 27 incidents where black cops, on or off duty, been shot or killed by their white counterparts in uniform, and it never happened in the reverse. Never. In New York, you never find a black uniform cop shooting or off duty or plainclothes white cop. And one of the main things that this panel of police experts that they brought from all across the country, that racial bias, conscious or unconscious, plays a role in the decision of a police officer to shoot or not shoot a subject. That's not David speaking. Those are the police experts speaking. So we have to have honest dialogue about that. We have to have honest dialogue on how communities of color, not just in Westchester County, but throughout the nation, are policed. I've been blessed being a part of the National Black Police Association, being in Blacks in Law Enforcement, being in the NAACP, to travel the country and go to different communities. And they're no different than Yonkers, Greenberg, White Plains, Mount Vernon. We have Fergusons here in Westchester County. See, and we have to admit that to move forward. We have to admit that there's a problem. We can't get it twisted and always looking at Ferguson, then we're never addressing the problems here in Yonkers, Mount Vernon, White Plains, Greenberg, or the Westchester County government. So this is a beautiful beginning, but where are we going to move from here? Where are we going to move from here? Because if we don't hold our own accountable, now the commissioner was saying that young black kids are not talking to the police. And what they call that, no snitching? Well, that's the result of what they see as the blue wall of silence. See, because if you're not going to turn over your bad guys that's in the police department, then the community's not going to turn over their bad guys. I mean, this is the talk that we honestly need to have. I've been waiting a long time to have this conversation.
Talk about it.
I've been waiting a long time because we really need to have it. It's not about what department you work in. It's about what's right and it's about what's wrong. And we need to start having the district attorney office here in these conversations also. See, because there's a problem. She cannot investigate local police department because the investigators from the DA's office come from the local police department. So how can they investigate themselves? If I'm investigating White Plains Police Department and my partner comes from White Plains Police Department, how can there be a thorough investigation of officers that I know? The DJ Henry story is classic. So we find out later that the chief lied on the report. The commissioner lied. The chief lied on the report. Officer Beckley said, I wasn't shooting at the car. I was shooting at the object that had the gun. So he was shooting at another officer. The press didn't talk about it. But where was the outrage in the communities? Where was the outrage from the churches? You're not sitting there and watching preachers with their hoodies on, but you have cops calling Kenneth Chamberlain an N-word, and they don't want to address it from the pulpit. Where's our accountability for ourselves and our communities? We have to begin to do that. We have to begin to do that now. Law enforcement is a hard job. I don't care what department you work in. Law enforcement is a hard job. It takes a toll on an officer. There's many good law enforcement officers in Westchester, but the problem is the good ones stay silent too. We know who are the mess-ups, for the lack of a better word. We know who they are. We can spot them when they come out their cabin. We can do it. But we allow the system to continue. Because when you look at an officer, once a life is taken, then you look at the officer, you say, oh my God, he had years of complaints. So where was the accountability to stop it? See, because that makes our job even harder. It makes my wife, who's out in the street, job even harder when they have a sergeant who cost the city $1 million in lawsuits, put back on the street, and then he kills somebody. So how does she go back in the community that she serves, that she's born and raised in? We have to start having officers that live and work in the community. We need it. That's real community policing. Community policing starting with police that live in the community. As simple as that. Because that's the respect level. Right now, there's no respect level. Because I could do you wrong, get on 95, go up to my home upstate, and never see you till I come back on my Monday. And won't really care. Law enforcement is not stakeholders in the community anymore. When I was growing up, there was 2 Greenberg cops, Mike and Ray Turnbull. They were my coaches through Dad's Club. We only had, back then, Greenberg only had 1 black cop. His name was Satch. But he knew every kid in the community. And he lived in Greenberg. So we need to get back to that, where cops live in the community. I don't know where we lost that. We used to have it. They used to call Officer Friendly. That was the program. Officer Friendly. And they were involved in the community. How many police officers today are actually coaches, are actually going to after-school programs on their own time, dealing with kids in their community? No, because they leave and they go upstate. So we have that gap between the community and we have that gap in law enforcement. And then we have the missed opportunity of accountability on both sides. See, we're not here to bash law enforcement. We're here to try to make law enforcement and the community work together. But also, for those in the community that feel that law enforcement is abusing them, many of those people don't vote. They don't come out and vote. So they wonder why policies and procedures don't change. And we have to have a push for local, state, and federal accountability. Whether it's an independent investigator, whether it's a civil complaint review board, or whether it's actually having state legislation that's going to define what is police criminality. See, because the problem with the Gardner case was that the officer violated policy, but he didn't commit a crime. So we have to define what is actually a police crime. I had a retired warden, Warden Burwell. He used to tell me, if 4 officers can't take 1 adult man down, they shouldn't be working. They shouldn't be working. It didn't make no sense for the Kenneth Chamberlain incident to have 5 or 6 officers with a body shield have to shoot and kill a man with COPD. Doesn't make any sense. So we have to look at how we are treated, and we have to look at the issues that's in law enforcement. We have a lot of issues. We see a lot of stuff, and that needs to be addressed also. Thank you.
Thanks, David. From Community Voices Heard.
So Damon just said everything I was going to say. I'm sitting here and I'm just trying to think about what are those things in the community that can happen to improve relationships between law enforcement and community. And the reality is, when we look at where police officers are targeting young black men or Latino men, they're in communities where there's high unemployment, lack of affordable housing, underperforming schools, and no good, nutritious places for people to eat. And when you look at all of that with individuals who aren't voting, right, because of all these other situations, and something happens, you see a police officer going in and targeting that community. So when I think about it, I'm looking at all those different things that are happening in the neighborhood and looking at what's going on in Westchester. We can't address the issue of police brutality and issues with law enforcement if we don't start addressing some of the main issues that are hurting our communities, that would cause these issues, like high unemployment, like underperforming schools. And all of that goes back to systems that were developed and created that didn't, or I should say that were created to not think about Black and Latinos, male or female, from the beginning. And until we have that conversation to really break down what those are, what those systems were, because all these are systems. Law enforcement is a system. Banking is a system. Education is a system. None of these systems were created to take care of people that look like most of the people on this panel. And when you have individuals that, yes, you want to have community policing, you want to have folks from the neighborhood, but if you're not addressing those systems and those policies, you're putting people that are coming from the neighborhood into a system that was not meant to protect them. You're not fixing anything. And so, you know, I've been doing organizing for 11 years. I feel like I've been doing it for 50 sometimes. And I talked to Gail, and I feel like I'm gonna be like Gail, like 20, 30 years from now, right? But the reality is, we don't talk about these systems. We don't talk about what needs to change in these neighborhoods. We don't talk about it as community members, and we don't talk about it from community to law enforcement. Right? Sometimes we don't even talk about it to the people that can make these laws, like elected officials, right? I'm fortunate that our organization has a good relationship with Councilmember Johnson, with Assemblywoman Mayor, right? We have good relationship with them and say, look, like this is not working in this neighborhood, in this community. This is what we need to see change in order for a larger population of people to feel a part of a neighborhood and a community. And when those same individuals come into my office and say, look, I was just harassed by the police, what do I do? I'm scrambling to figure out what the process and the procedure is, because again, there's another system that I don't understand. So I'm searching, I'm calling the council member's office and saying, okay, so where do I go for this documentation? Who do I call? Right? And then when I have that person fill out the information and then they submit it, I don't know what happens. So somehow this person is lost again in a system that was not designed to protect them. But we're not talking about those systems. We're not talking about the breaking down. We're not talking about those things that need to be changed in order for us to prosper as a community. And when we don't hold, like Damon was saying, if we don't hold each other accountable around something that's broken, how can we turn around and hold a police officer accountable for roughing somebody up, right? How do we turn around and hold an elected official accountable and say, you should be saying police brutality is a crime? And what are you going to do about it in the next election? What are you going to do about it if you're elected? Right? Just last week, CBH and Black Law Enforcement and Westpac and some other organizations were part of a rally, more so a press conference, right, to talk to the county executive around policing. No one from his office came down to talk to representatives from our group. That's a problem. When the person who's supposed to be examining these systems and these policies and protecting, in quotes, right, all community members refuses to send someone down to accept a letter saying, hey, we want to meet with you on police brutality issues. That's a problem. So how do we address community issues? We need to have those open and honest conversations about systems. Yes, the media portrays Black men and Latino men as scary, as vicious. As soon as someone comes close to you, automatically your first reaction is fear. I'm supposed to do something to protect myself, so I'm going to grab my gun against a 17-year-old child. We don't talk about that because we don't want to talk about race. We don't want to talk about class. We don't want to talk about things that make us uncomfortable. But you know what? Young people are dying every day. Every hour. That should be uncomfortable. That alone should make everyone in this room mad that it's not just happening in Ferguson, Missouri. It's happening in White Plains. God forbid it happens in Yonkers. We need to be upset now to start to look at those systems and those policies and start changing those things now. Because you know what? We're going to come back again next year and say, well, we had a really good conversation last year. We should have another conversation. I personally am not in the business of having a conversation. I have a conversation to think about a strategy and then I act. Because that's the whole thing about building power, is the ability to act. And so if people are ready to actually act and want to do that, then let's figure out that strategy to move forward so we can get that independent review panel, so we can get that independent investigator who says this system is broken and I want to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, Sister Sean, and all of you for allowing me to be on this. I'm humbled and nervous because this is massive what's going on here, and for me to be able to add to all of the brilliant things that were said, I didn't want to just say words because I want to be helpful at moving the ball up the field. You know, I'm a preacher. I didn't want to be a preacher. I wanted to go make a lot of money and travel the world. I was a banker before that, but there was a calling on my life to not only teach the Word of God to people that they may come to have a deeper relationship with their Creator and to find peace for their families, but I also was called to speak truth in environments like this about equity and justice, and to bring light in the midst of darkness, and to require what many of us claim to have as a moral compass, to require us to respond to an imbalance around us, to cause others who are oppressed and poor to get their fair share, and to make sure that those who don't have a voice have a voice. And so I come to a city that I didn't grow up here. I don't know a whole bunch of people. I've been here 10 years, and this community of do-gooders, I've been embraced by many of them who are in this room right now, who do some tremendous work to make Yonkers what it is. I can't sit here and say that Yonkers is so bad, because there's so many people here working to make it better. And so, with that said, though, you know, I hear Martin King, a doctor, Reverend Doctor, that's this whole year, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King say that we cannot take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism and say, well, we're going slowly, then we should all be all right with the pace. He worked very diligently to push change and to cause those who were quiet to speak up, and they had great victory through the legislation in 1968. But following the legislation, the bill that was passed for civil rights, there was a president in office named Nixon who was having some trouble implementing and making the change of that bill stick. And he called in experts to help him move the ball. And there was a fellow named Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who was a Democrat, called to help a Republican president, and to counsel him on how to move the process of the civil rights bill forward. And he counseled Nixon with a policy, a doctrine called benign neglect. Benign neglect. And benign neglect says to push for the advancement of the Negro, but don't speak about racism. Don't even part your lips to discuss it. It is counterproductive, and you can push for their rights, but do not have an honest conversation about the systemic racism that runs this, our wonderful country. The lacerations, jagged lacerations of Jim Crow have not healed, and they act like it never happened. Get over it. Thinking that our nation healed from that divisive, disgusting policy that was rooted in slavery. Now, what's that got to do with what we're talking about? Truth is that if we're going to improve relations, we need to do away with benign neglect. We need to have an honest conversation about systemic racism and how it affects how we deal with one another. It's going to be very difficult to face, but the truth is as a black man, I'm forced to see it every day. We're not racist, Pastor Hassel. Some of my best friends are black. I don't even think you're aware of the racism that is so deeply rooted in our country. I asked a friend of mine today, what should I talk about today? And I said, because how do I explain the difference between how the east side of Yonkers is policed and how the west side is policed? I asked that question, he says, it's because, I gotta read it because it's a big word. Brown, because I'm brown, I'm not black. Last time I checked, my coat was black when I wore it here, but I'm brown. But the fact that we're labeled black, it has a connotation to it that follows through a whole mindset on how you treat people of color. And you're not even aware of the fact that what you saw on television the night before puts you on edge when you're policing someone who looks like the perpetrator on the television show you watch. It's not just the television, it's systemic how we view a community that we come from outside of to tame the animals, the beasts. As one police officer called his victim, he says he looked like a demon. That perception causes tension from the jump. That someone who is breaking a minor crime or a minor law is treated as if he were a threat from the moment you come in contact with them. That person's fear is also perpetrated. It's a fear dance. The police are afraid. The community is afraid because of perceived postures. I don't want to be too long, and if you have to ring the bell, I'll be done in a second. But we have to do something about that perception, and it can only be done with an honest conversation. I know many are annoyed by the notion that there's still racism and that you need to get over it. Are we that bad? Haven't we made progress? Aren't we nice to our Negroes? It's really it's a comfortable conversation at that level, but we need to be honest. The systemic issues that you spoke of about education and economics and those things perpetuate the problem. But that's not what we're here to talk. We can't fix one without the other, but we're not really here to talk about that systemic issue because the illusion of opportunity has to be perpetuated. That if I can pull myself up by my bootstraps, then they should be able to also, not knowing that the deck is stacked against a community from day one. So, if I were to talk about solutions, the first thing is that we have to overcome and ignore this doctrine of benign neglect, and we need to have an honest conversation about that. And the fear and intimidation tactics used by those vested with a vested interest in the status quo needs to stop. When Black Lives Matter, when that movement started, it appeared to be attached to some anti-police thing, and all it was trying to do was raise the awareness of people around them. And I remember being so fired up about this, and I go out and then I hear Willie Lynch, I'm not Willie, what's his first name? Patrick Lynch, excuse me. I heard him blame me for the death, because I'm an activist. He blamed me for the blood and the death of those two officers, one of which is a schoolmate of mine from Faith Seminary in Tacoma. The fear and the anxiety that was caused by his words in the atmosphere made me retract what I was saying about Black Lives Matter, to the point where when I was having a conversation with someone else, say, someone in power, I was like, oh, I wasn't talking to you, I was talking to me. Like, what kind of fear nonsense would make me not want to stand up for a community to take an opportunity to say that Black Lives Matter? This is not just about me telling the thugs on the street to stop killing. This is not about me speaking to a system that has said those lives don't matter. And if you don't believe it, read your Constitution, and it says that black people were 3/5 of a man. You think that mindset has left America? You're wrong. And so I think that if we're going to do it, I sit on a committee here in the city of Yonkers, the Police Commissioners Committee on Community Relations. And they were training us to be sensitive to the perils of police work. And they did a very good job. I was sensitized on what it takes to be a police officer. But I was frustrated by the lack of openness by those same trainers to feel the plight and hear the voice of the ones being policed. The moment I mentioned my anxiety, my experience with the police, a defensive, it was ugly. And I can understand how tough it is to be blue. But I wish blue would understand how tough it is to be black. Amen. The meetings I've had with Commissioner Garner and Keith Olson and various captains show a genuine interest in doing something, but I have not seen a cohesive plan that addressed the core problem. The most apparent solution has been dismissed by touting budget constraints, and that apparent solution has already been mentioned, which is community policing. They said, well, we can't afford it. But if truth be told, more pressing interests in policing have gotten the funding they needed and overcome those, even though they cost more per day than the community policing. And I think we need to take an honest look at the budgeting and to see how we can find a way to make this community policing make it work. The training piece that, again, excuse me, this is my last point. The training piece, which has been a priority of our commissioner, who is my friend, and he's been very open to this process. The training piece, I think, should be on two components. On the humanization of the community and dealing with the perception of criminality that skews the administration of justice. And so we can talk more about that, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. And I'm so happy about this, you guys have no idea. We have Assemblywoman Shelley Mayer here, and just in case, but I'm sure you will remember you're a brilliant attorney. What do you think should be done to improve police and community relations?
Well, one, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I actually feel it's my responsibility both to hear the conversation and then to try to work together to find some answers. So I think from my perspective, there's sort of two pieces to it. First, as everybody said, is dialogue and listening. And I think one of the challenges, and a number of people have spoken about it, is race is a very difficult subject in America still. And it is hard for people to talk about race. And I think we, and credit to Sean Patterson Howard for convening this. This is the beginning, in my estimation, I'm sure there are other opportunities, to have frank conversations. And that means two things, in my opinion. One, saying honest things, which have been said here. But two is hearing honest things that we don't like to hear, and doing so respectfully. And I am a very big believer in that. I appreciate that Keith Olson, from the president of the PBA, is here to listen. He and I spoke earlier today. We don't agree about everything. But I think one of the little bit of problem we got in during the last few months is we escalated our respective tones, and with no criticism of the movement of Black Lives Matter, which I have a lot of sympathy for, but with the tone and then the murder of the officers, very honestly, we got into a situation where we stopped listening to each other. So I believe we have a responsibility to listen, to talk about race openly, and to hear the things we don't always like to hear from each other. Secondly, I think it takes leadership at a local level. I'm a big believer in this, for a police department to get better. I want to credit Commissioner Gardner. I think he's done, in my tenure here in the Assembly, a job of bringing the police department along. But it takes leadership to know who the bad apples are and do something about them.
Exactly.
And anyone who's ever worked anywhere, whether you worked in a hospital, police department, a car towing place, you know who the problem people are. And that's the same with police officers. If they come out of the academy and they're a problem, we need to have a system where we curb them quickly and determine whether they are really fit to be police officers, to carry a gun, and to carry out law enforcement. So I want to commend the Commissioner, because I think leadership is incredibly important in changing the behavior and the culture of what is acceptable in a department. I think another point that has not raised, I feel very passionately, diversity of a police department. Racial diversity of a police department in a city as diverse as Yonkers is a priority. We need to continue to do better. Talk about the unspoken truth. Race is an issue when you have a predominantly white force in communities of color, and we have to do a better job of making sure our department is as diverse as it can be. Once we listen, and that's an ongoing process, we actually have to think about how to do better. And there are a number of ideas in Albany. I just got back this morning, floating around. Some credit to Senator Stewart Cousins, who really took the lead on some of these, our Attorney General Schneiderman. And I don't think everyone agrees about how to deal with some of this stuff, but we have to talk about it and work through it, whether it is changing the rules about grand jury secrecy so that people can read the transcript of what happened in a grand jury. And there is a proposal to modify the secrecy of the grand jury that is under consideration, or will be when we get past the budget, probably. The issue of special prosecutors. Do people believe, do they have faith, whether it's correct or not, that a district attorney can be a very adequate judge of the strength of a case when they're dealing with police officers in their office every day in terms of investigations, cases, trials, motions, and all of those issues we have to examine. Is there a better way? The governor put on the table some proposals in his State of the State. I don't think they go far enough. But to his credit, he recognized we have to talk about this. There's a bill Senator Stewart Cousins has had. There's a number of other bills that have been in the legislature saying that every time, if there is a death in an altercation between a police officer and a civilian, and there are compelling circumstances, a case should be referred to the Attorney General's office. I spent 14 years there. I think it's a highly professional office, regardless of whatever party holds it. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have to talk about, should we have a different system for that? And the other piece we're not talking enough about is our court system, our family court, our city court. How things are dealt with at the court level leaves people sometimes with a very sour taste about our system of justice. And we have to do better. So after and while we're talking and listening and hearing things we don't like and saying things that are hard, but respectfully and honestly, I really feel strongly about the language with which we talk about these issues must be respectful to our law enforcement folks and to our folks who are not law enforcement. Respect is a two-way street in this conversation. But having these conversations, then we have to do something. And those of us who are policymakers and can make laws, it's our job to come up with the best alternatives, to acknowledge we're not going to all agree, and then we're going to have to compromise, and it's not going to be perfect, and we're going to come back with something, and people are going to say, oh, that's terrible, why did you do that? That's so stupid. You know what? Making laws is a messy business, like sausage, they say. So if we can come up with some good ideas here, or in White Plains, or Mount Vernon, or anywhere in New York, and there's some good ideas out there, then it's our job, representing this community, to try to find a way to improve the laws that govern the behavior. So I appreciate the experience and the opportunity to listen tonight, and to take with me, and then to engage in an ongoing process, which I think we need to do. And I appreciate the tone of all the conversation here, and I'm sure the questions as well. But I think we got to focus on what we can do to make it better, and not just voice our discontent. Exactly. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. I have about 10 more minutes of questions, and then I'd like to field questions from you guys, because I really want one to Chief Gardner really quickly, if you can remember. How many African-American officers are on the police force now, and how many Hispanic officers are on the police force currently?
Okay. Currently, the department has, Currently, the department is 82% white, 5% black, 12% Latino, and 1% other. I want to talk about the recruitment efforts that we have made since I've been commissioner, and I've been commissioner for the past 3 years. You know, I do believe that it's important to have a department that's representative of the community it serves, and we have made significant efforts in an attempt to recruit minority officers within the department. You know, we had a police officer exam in November of 2013, and earlier that year we began an aggressive recruitment campaign, and we reached out to community groups and asked for their help in getting the word out and helping us to recruit individuals to take the exam. We reached out to groups like the NAACP, the YMCA, the YWCA, the Yonkers Guardians, Westchester Guardians. Actually, I think I called you, Damon, personally and asked for your help. Hispanic Law Enforcement Officers Association, and other groups. We've had extensive social media outreach, media releases, paid advertising, videos, and we've had success in getting the minority population out to take the exam, and for the first time, the percentages of the breakdown of the individuals that took the exam was representative of the community. But then, when you have the results of the exam, it's difficult to stay within civil service guidelines when you're trying to hire. I can tell you that when I became commissioner 3 years ago, there were 24 black officers, and today there are 30. So, I mean, that's a 25% increase, and every opportunity that I had to hire a minority officer, I took advantage of it. You know, we have civil service guidelines that we have to work within, the rules and regulations of the guidelines. And again, we have made efforts to try to reach out to the community in our efforts to recruit, and when we have the opportunity to hire officers from the community.
I have a question.
Yes.
How many of those officers are in the supervisory position?
2.
Okay.
Except one of them is here this evening, and in November, our sergeant's list was about to expire, and we had 3 vacancies. We hired 2 over in an effort to appoint a minority supervisor with the support of the mayor, we're able to do that and hire. So I do make efforts when I have the opportunity to do that.
I have a question as well. Have you gone to college campuses and let people who probably would do very well on a civil service exam know that you're hiring?
We've reached out to colleges, we went to businesses throughout the city, we had advertisements on buses, bus depots, we reached out to the clergy, we really made a sincere effort to recruit people to take the exam. We have offered classes on preparation for the exam free of charge to Yonkers residents, and I believe we made an honest effort to recruit and retain and hire when I can, within the law, representatives from the community.
Is there a breakdown, I'm sorry, Commissioner, is there a breakdown, I know maybe it's not appropriate based upon, standards of confidentiality or discrimination, but do you have any numbers to suggest how many white officers, white citizens took the test versus people of color?
The statistics we got from Human Resources regarding the exam, the police officer entrance exam, were that the applications were approximately 36% white, 43% Hispanic, 17% black, and 4% other. Now, by law, I don't believe that it's required to put your race on the application.
It's optional.
Right, it's optional, but our estimates from our Human Resources gave us those numbers.
I'd like to say something.
Briefly, Mr. Joe.
Yes, real quick.
There you go.
We have to understand, when we're looking at recruiting African-American males and females, we are going against a culture that really don't want the job because of their experiences or their parents' experiences in dealing with law enforcement. I've been to forums when grown people, adults, parents, are saying that they don't want their children to be a part of law enforcement. So, and also, to the credit of the commissioner, he is trying over years of not having that type of outreach in the Yonkers community or Westchester or Westchester itself. My wife is a detective, I'm a correctional officer, we have 2 children, they want no parts of law enforcement. Because of what they experienced, I had to go down to the 67th precinct and deal with something with my daughter. So, young children that are able to take the test, they don't want the job. So we have to change what the job is to young black men and women. We have to change it. But it goes back, again, it goes back to accountability, because if they don't see the type of accountability, then they don't want to be a part of it. So what they're doing and the numbers that they're doing it with is good, and we have to continue to do it so more kids will want to take the test. And I think it goes back to dialogue. It goes back to being in the community, and it goes back to them seeing a different type of policing in their community, that they want to be a part of an occupation or a career that you can really take care of your family.
Okay, I have a question for the commissioner from the audience. How do you handle officers who have had multiple complaints against them? How do you reprimand or discipline these officers? And I know that, or I could roll them off, but I won't. I call them a dirty dozen, that they've been repeated complaints, and unfortunately some have been promoted. Pataki did come up on numerous complaints when I was NAACP president, but how do you address?
I think feedback I get from some community groups or individuals from the community is that we don't discipline our officers. Obviously, I can't talk about specific internal matters or details regarding internal investigations, but I just took a quick summary of some of the discipline that's been handed out over the past 3 years to give you just a little bit of an understanding. In 2012, we had 3 civilian complaint investigations substantiated for a total penalty of 35 days pay for officers. We had 10 substantiated administrative self-initiated investigations with a total of 14 days in penalties. And in 2012, I terminated a police officer for excessive force on a self-initiated, department-initiated investigation without a complaint from anybody in the community. In 2013, we had 2 substantiated civilian complaints for a total of 33 penalties and 18 self-initiated investigations that were substantiated, totaling 125 days and penalties to officers. This year, in the past year, we have several open investigations, but we had 1 substantiated civilian complaint for a total of 1 day and 5 administrative, 5 days. And over this past year, I've suspended 3 officers without pay, 1 forced resignation, and 1 termination. So we do discipline our officers. We have recently purchased and have instituted an early warning system, an early intervention system. It's not fully operational, it's partially operational, but basically, this is one of the recommendations from the Department of Justice, is that this system identifies different categories, such as injury to a prisoner, injury to an officer, pursuits, days sick. It is a number of different categories, and the system tracks officers because it's difficult to try to keep track of the different issues that are going on with particular officers. And the system gives you an early warning before the behavior becomes problematic, and gives you an opportunity to intervene and maybe try to determine what's going on with the officer. This is some of the preventive initiatives that we're engaged in. So,
does your department have, and I genuinely don't know, currently have body cameras?
we do not have body cameras at this time. Actually, the president of the PBA and I have been discussing the possibility of exploring body cameras, but we do not have them at this
Is
time.
that a collective bargaining issue or a budgetary issue?
It's an item that has to be negotiated or discussed with the union, but we do not have it at this time.
Okay, so it's a collective bargaining issue. So, one more question and I'm getting to the audience. You currently have an independent civilian complaint review board? Or independent civilian complaint review something? Okay.
We have what's called the Police Professional Standards Review Board, and it's comprised of 5 members of the community and 4 members of the department. And what this board does is it reviews completed investigations from our Internal Affairs Division on a monthly basis and makes recommendations on whether the investigations were thorough and complete, whether they agree with the conclusions made, or whether they want to send it back or recommend additional investigation be conducted. Since I've been commissioner, there were 2 vacancies on the board, and I did have the opportunity to appoint 2 individuals, and one of the individuals I appointed was the former president of the Yonkers NAACP. I thought it was important to have a different point of view, and I did appoint her to this board recently.
Okay. Okay, so I want to get to the audience. Anybody have questions? Let's get, I know, I'll get to you. Someone who's never asked a question. Let's start with you and then we'll leave that.
Good evening. I just want to ask a question about getting to the root of the issue. I feel like when Ina talked about our broken system as a whole, issues around housing, issues around food, issues around employment, I think some of our laws and just voting, there's a lot of issues around voting. And so what is the one issue that we can focus on to address this whole broken system? The Assemblywoman is here. Can we talk about what is the possibility of having a racial impact on every law that is passed, on every industry, on every company that have a racial impact when they have a policy or a law or something that's right?
Feel like Cobra.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I'll be honest with you. That would never have a chance of passing the legislature. What?
Is it environmental study?
No. I hear you, and I think it's actually an interesting point. It's an interesting point. I think one of the points you're really getting at, and I don't think that's the approach that's going to work, so I'm just telling you. But I think what you're saying is we pass laws that have disproportionate impact in certain communities, and we rarely go back and evaluate them and then change them to make sure they don't. And that's why some of the things we're talking about, whether it's a special prosecutor, because of the issue of whether death in encounters between civilians and police is disproportionate in the African American or communities of color. That's a claim, and I think one of the ways to deal with it is to say, let's take it out of the system that we have and create a different system. So I can appreciate that's one suggestion. I'm just telling you from the point of view of a legislative body, that we're not going to be able to get. What we can get is improvements in our system of justice that address areas where we have disproportionate impact on communities of color, and our system is now working well to give justice. Because it's not only about race, it's also about justice for all. So if our laws don't have an outcome of justice across the board, then we need to modify them. And I, for one, am very open to creative ways to do it. I just am very honest. I'm in a body of 150, and Senator Stewart Cousins and Senator Latimer, who represent Yonkers, in a body of 63 controlled by Republicans. I'm in a body controlled by Democrats. Even so, such a race-specific thing is neither lawful, honestly, nor likely to pass. But I'm happy to discuss with you.
And she's an assemblywoman and an attorney, so I guess pretty good answer. The lady in the back and this gentleman now. All right, get Tatum.
This is for the Commissioner. Thanks for all the work that you do. It seems the system for complaint is not user-friendly up front. I'm a pastor. Someone comes to me and complains. I may call somebody because I know somebody on the inside. How can we make that system more user-friendly? And how can the community know that these cases are investigated and in some cases something is done? Not that we want to blast the police, but it's like, oh, they will do nothing, so why are we trusting them anyway? And maybe even if, you get what I'm saying? We got to make this process. Someone said a brochure. What can we do so the community say, oh, they're really serious about this?
We have worked hard to make the process more user-friendly. Well, I understand that people are reluctant and may feel uncomfortable going into a police precinct and make a complaint about a police officer, but we have our complaint forms in community organizations throughout the city. They're at the Neppahan Community Center. I believe they're at the library here. We have put our complaint forms online so people can download them and mail them to our Internal Affairs Division. We moved our Internal Affairs Division to an off-site location so a person will not have to come to a precinct to make a complaint. So you can make a complaint. We have them in English and Spanish. We have information in all of our buildings on how to make a complaint. A sign tells you how to make a complaint. So we have made efforts to try to make it more user-friendly. You can call us, you can mail it in, you can come in person, you can pick up the forms at a non-police facility. And that's an effort that we've been working on. I think we have made progress in that area.
Can I just very briefly respond to the previous question? And your question was with respect to racial impact?
Yeah.
All right. Well, if someone gets arrested in Brooklyn and they get charged with a felony because they damaged more than $250 worth of somebody's property, and they go to state prison because they had a previous incident where they had another felony, minor or major, doesn't matter. That person goes upstate someplace most likely, unless you go to Sing Sing, okay, or unless you go to Bedford. And when you go there, you get counted there as a citizen of that community. So federal dollars, state dollars, aid goes to that community, and it comes away from your community. So we can change that legislatively. That's a pretty easy fix. And at the end of the day, you can sit there and it should be an easy fix. And when you stop and think about it, you look at three or four communities that represent the vast majority of people who are in the New York State penal system. And you're talking about an industry here. You're talking about big dollars. Okay, it's an economic system here. And you have towns that otherwise would not exist but for the state prison that is where they are. That prison feeds all the little stores and restaurants that are around the prison. That's the center of the community. And those people get very upset when their livelihood is threatened. And if you go into the criminal justice system, you are their livelihood. So if you get stopped and frisked, only in certain communities, as we had in New York City for the last 20 years, you're more likely to find yourself in that system. If you stop and frisk every kid in Scarsdale, you're going to find all kinds of drugs. Drug stuff we didn't even know was a drug, okay? But they're not going to get stopped and frisked. They're going to go on to become your assistant district attorneys, to be your congressmen and women, and to write more laws that will eventually lead to the incarceration of people in Yonkers and Mount Vernon and Brooklyn. So that's what you have to do, I would think. And you got to vote. And you got to hold your leaders accountable. And when you go out to vote, don't ask them about what they think about the French school being on the golf course. Ask them about these issues. What's your position on accountability across the board? Because unfortunately, Officer Blue and Officer Ramos, when they were killed, there's not one person that I believe in this room who wouldn't want the person who killed them to be held accountable if he was still alive. Nobody would be out there marching talking about liberate that man. Okay? He was wrong. But it has to be the same way if police engage in misconduct and they end up taking someone's life in the community. We have to have that same accountability across the board.
Thank you.
There's some great things that we talked about tonight, and the antecedents and what has caused some of the trauma that our community is experiencing is too long to talk about tonight, but great things have been said. I guess we're talking about solutions. I run a mentoring program in the Yonkers YMCA, and which is, I think, a brilliantly strong program. And we have to look at the solution individually, collectively, and universally. First, individually, I would like for everybody to take a look at when they were struggling in their lives, who was there for them to help them through the struggles that they were dealing with. A mentor, it could be anybody, pastor, priest, family member, maybe even police officer. I remember back in the day where a police officer actually could be a good mentor to you, but things have changed. So let's look at the solutions individually. We need strong men and women who are willing to go out here in the community and work with these young men and women. And our program is, we address kids who are 10 to 16 years of age, who are growing up in homes where nobody in the home is able to tell them right or wrong. And I'm serious about this. And I go to the homes and I visit these families. If you think that you could be a part of the solution, and you have time to volunteer your time, and I'm going to leave paperwork on there, because we can blame everybody. There's good police officers and bad police officers. There's good people on the street and bad people on the street. That's just human nature. What can we do to police our own community? And that means getting out there, taking these kids by the hand, and telling them, no, it's not okay to curse out a police officer. No, it's not okay to hit your girlfriend. No, it's not okay to sell drugs. Here's what you need to do in order to be, not to be a statistic. That's the first thing about accountability. And to the police department, you're one of a few police departments that actually are trying to make some changes in the community. And I want to applaud you for what you're trying to do, Commissioner, and your people. But to address the police department, there's nothing more powerful than a police officer mentoring a child. That's how you can help change and alter some of these misperceptions, these skepticisms, these mistrusts that we've created amongst ourselves. What better way for the police department to mentor a child? To show the community that I care about your Black, Hispanic, and other kid. I care about you looking at me as a human being, that I do care about your community. I'm volunteering my time. That behavior will spread through this community like the plague. They do care about us. They volunteer their time. I had one police officer who volunteered to become a mentor, Commissioner. Sadly, she could not stay because she moved them. She was a New York City police officer. So maybe there's something that the Commissioner's office can do in partnership with your the rank and file, and say, okay, listen, you volunteer your time to mentor some of these kids in Mount Vernon. I used to work in Mount Vernon. I'm sorry, I'm mentioning over there. And maybe there's some conversation you can give them. But that would go a long way to, I think, bridging some of this gap that we have. That's what I want to say. Thank you.
Accountability, and we have to have a conversation in the community, but it's not to the exclusion of why we're here today. And if we start thinking that it's easier to go out and build buildings and buy businesses and all that stuff, you think it takes a long time to have this conversation, see how long it takes for that to happen.
Exactly.
Now, what I will say also is I happen to represent the estate of Kenneth Chamberlain Sr. And Mr. Chamberlain, 68-year-old man in his home, retired Marine, retired correction officer, was a member of law enforcement, in his house when his life aid system went off in the morning, close to 5 o'clock. The police went to his house, asked him if he was okay. He said he was. At that point, they could have left. Instead, they stayed there for another 90 minutes, broke his door down. At one point, he said, I'm a 68-year-old man with a heart condition, all right, and won't you please leave me alone? At which point, at least one of the officers, because we've heard this said multiple times, because it's audio tape and video from a taser, we don't give an F and call them the N-word. So you can have all the businesses you want to, but I'll tell you this, when somebody comes to your door, to your loved one's door, your parents' door, or you're suffering from early onset of Alzheimer's and you don't know that maybe they're there to help you, and they break that door down, shoot and kill him, then that's a conversation that businesses, all the businesses in the world will not help you. So that's definitely a major component of where we need to go, but we cannot, under any circumstances, stop having the conversation that we came here to have. And the other conversations need to be had, and I'm all for those, and I'll be there. Let me know when you want to have it, I'll be there. But at the end of the day, not every police commissioner is willing to say, hey, I'm going to have my complaints in the library, because that was going to be my suggestion. You're the only commissioner I'm aware of, only department I'm aware of that has the foresight to realize that if I'm complaining about an officer, maybe I don't want to go to that person's office to complain. So you have to look at the other officers, the other departments that are not doing as good a job, that are not willing to be a partner in this effort. And I think that we have to keep our eye on the ball with respect to what we're here for right now. It's great to talk about other things, but once we start to shift the focus, this will not be completed, and we're nowhere near completing it. A lot of the things we're talking about right now, just think about the conversations. We're talking about training, racial training. Do you need to be taught not to discriminate against people when you wake up in the morning and you see someone who doesn't look like you? You need someone to teach you that you don't abuse that person? That you don't make fun of them based on their race or their ethnicity or their religion? No, that should be inherent in you. You talk about being 6 years old, little kids know how to treat each other. They have to be taught how not to treat each other properly.
Right, that's right, that's right. To add to that, you know, when we talk about solutions, again, I can't say enough. When you sit back and say, I will not tolerate, and I mean this from the churches, I mean this from the politicians, I mean this from the police chiefs and commissioners, we will not tolerate police brutality, nor will we tolerate criminality from anywhere. Not only from the people, but from the police. And as an officer, I was always taught that I'm held to a higher standard. So I had to deal with things, and I can give you an experience working my first year on the job, and they put me in a cell with this white guy that called me every nigger, everything in the book, and my mother. And my boss said, well, you know, you're going to have to learn how to deal with that. But then I hear later on, and I learned to deal with it. And my skin became thicker because I got it from both white, I got it from black, I got it from everybody. Spanish, man, alien came down and the shit cussed me out. I mean, I took it off. But, you know, the thing that bothers me the most is that then when other people did it, they made excuses for it, as opposed to dealing with it. You know, it's accountability, it's speaking to what you really mean, it's teaching our young people. I've always made a proposal that you need to teach the law in schools. It needs to be, because it affects so much. All of these things they teach you in school, math, English, the law will ruin you one time being arrested for the wrong thing. It needs to be taught in your schools. You need to have accountability, a special prosecutor, however you want to do it. They can't do it in your own department. You know, these things have to be done. We are sitting here having a conversation, and I enjoy this, don't get me wrong. But I'm really not saying what I really want to say, because we don't have the time. So I'm just running real quickly, accountability, speaking to the fact that you're not tolerating police brutality, then acting on it. And I mean, that's coming from all the politicians, that's coming from the police commission, that's coming from even your churches. Because the preachers and pastors that I remember, they were activists, they dealt with social issues. They weren't politicians. And that's what I see a lot of today. And it angers me when I see somebody buying a building for $1, that they sold for $1 million. Some, you know, well, you know.
All right.
That's going to the
Okay, David Jones.
I think when we, you know, we're here to look at solutions. How do we work with solutions? But also we have to look at the voting power of minorities in their community. I always say that black people are the only, or people of color are the only ethnic group that don't have a say in how their community is policed. Now, the whole Black Lives Matter thing is great. You see 10,000 people marching, but how many are registered to vote? How many of them do vote? Now, it's something I looked at was very interesting, and I put it in an older statement. Now, on December 14th, 20 children and 6 adults were killed in Sandy Hook. By January 15th, New York State passed the most hardest gun law legislation in the nation. We have lost over 200 and something people since Amadou Diallo was killed by police. Now, we passed January 15th, and no piece of legislation in the state has passed to address the issue of police criminality in New York State. So we must ask Governor Cuomo, marching in DC, that's not doing anything. We need to be marching in Albany. Yeah. See, we need to force Governor Cuomo's hand because, see, I was up there when we was talking to the bill with former Senator
Eric Adams?
the one that just Malcolm Smith. Thank you. I was up there, so I know the urgency that they pushed the bill through. Where is the urgency with Black lives in New York State? That's what we need to be asking the governor. Where is the urgency? Because by the time he did the state of the state, the other time with the gun bill, it was already passed. It was already passed. So we need to start focusing our energy up in Albany to force them to pay the bills, to pass these pieces of legislation, to give elected officials like the Assemblywoman right here the power to push the legislation. Because if they don't see, we understand politics is all about the numbers game. It's all about the numbers game. We don't vote. We don't donate any money to campaigns. It's the truth. We don't put no money to campaigns.
Gotta pay rent.
We just give the vote, but then when we expect something. But who gets the favors is the ones who put the money up to the campaign. I mean, it is what it is. I ran for city council. I know what it's about. So we have to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to start, once the weather get warm, we better go to Albany and start marching. Because that's the way the bill's gonna pass. When we start putting pressure on the government. Thank you.
Thanks.